me the truth!
I saw it dead in the eyes.
We are talking Craving. This is directed by Jay Hornton, who also co-wrote the movie. And this one stars Felissa Rose. I say stars, she's not in a huge amount, but she is the kind of the headline name here. Now, have you ever seen a movie called Feast? A creature feature, I think from 2005. If so, this movie might feel a little similar to that, because it does have some similar elements. It's like kind of one location movie taking place in this spit and sawdust rural bar. We see the kind of the patrons of this bar, you know, enjoying a drink this one particular evening. However, there seems to be a bit of a commotion outside, and we get a gang of kind of drug addicts kind of busting in with guns, ultimately kind of holding them hostage. But there's also a different gang of people kind of outside, preventing anyone from leaving. So now we have kind of three groups of people: the bar patrons, this kind of gang of drug addicts or apparent drug addicts, and this kind of people outside. Now, we learn that these people outside think someone in this bar could well be a monster. Now, is that a metaphor, or do they mean a literal monster? And as the film progresses, we have a kind of lot of character interactions and flashbacks about the kind of the circumstances that led up to this. Inevitably, we do see there is a literal monster that comes a-calling towards the end of the film. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss Craving. Now, this is a low-budget movie. What can I say in the plus column here? Now, there are elements of this movie I think any B-movie creature feature fan will love. This movie is surprisingly gory, considering it's clearly a very low budget movie. There is quite a lot of gore here, and it's both in some sequences fairly realistic. There's a sequence where someone's going to kind of get their skin peeled off their arm a little bit, and it looks pretty impressive, I have to say. And then other sequences where we see it's kind of like fun over the top gore. You know, think kind of the early works of kind of Peter Jackson and kind of stuff like that. But there's lots of kind of heads getting ripped off, guts being kind of pulled out. And I have to say as well, though it's a little bit kind of cheap, but a fun-looking creature when it kind of turns up kind of towards the end of the movie. That's you know, a little bit like the kind of the creatures from Feast, but you've kind of got a little bit of kind of alien vibe in there. It looks pretty interesting, I have to say. It's a kind of a fun design, and one of the advantages of having a large cast, as this movie does, is there's plenty of people for this creature to kill. So we do get that. And I have to say, I feel this movie is top and tailed relatively strong. It kind of finishes pretty strong with a kind of a, you know, the kind of the monster kind of turning up around the kind of just past the hour mark. And I think this setup is quite good. The kind of the introduction to this kind of the people at this bar and this kind of getting kind of somewhat kind of locked in, I think is an interesting setup. I do think there's some interesting work done here with the lighting as well. Because we're in this bar, there's lots of kind of like fluorescent kind of style lighting here, which gives it this kind of like this washed out kind of feel. But I actually thought it looked quite effective at times, so I quite enjoyed the kind of the lighting here, and some of the technical elements I think are well done. There are some kind of fun performances here. The acting is mixed, I'm going to come on to it, but there are one or two performances here, and I'll include Felissa Rose in that, but who are kind of quite fun and are kind of like clearly kind of lapping up the kind of the schlocky goodness that this movie is delivering. But there's a few kind of performances that I kind of quite like. And this movie is trying to be part horror movie, kind of part Tarantino-esque kind of crime thriller. Does it succeed in it? The short answer, no. The movie is at its strongest when it is dealing with straight horror. The major downside of this movie for me was its kind of dramatic sequences. Now, the middle portion of the movie I would say the bulk of it. I mean, the last 15 minutes is fun. The first 15 minutes is fairly good kind of setup. But the bulk in the middle, kind of like 50 minutes or so, 45 minutes, is the kind of the dramatic section where people are double crossing themselves. We learn secrets about different people, and it's cut between lots of kind of different kind of flashbacks. It's flawed for a number of reasons. Number one, there's way too many characters in this movie. I mean, we have about 4 or 5, maybe 6 kind of bar patrons. We get this group of this kind of like hostage takers, this kind of group of sort of drug addicts, although I don't think they're all drug addicts, but some of them are, that come, and there's about kind of like 5 of those. And then we have about this, about the same number again outside, these kind of like people that are keeping them inside. And it's just too many people, because you never really feel like there's a central character in this movie. I mean, maybe it's going for an ensemble feel, but you never really feel like you're able to connect with anyone, because there's just too many characters. There's too many kind of like B storylines that this movie has tried to kind of juggle, and we get a lot of flashbacks with a lot of kind of like especially the kind of the drug addict kind of second group of people, and how their circumstances to how they've kind of got to this kind of place and stuff. But yeah, you feel like you don't really know what is going on in regards to these kind of personal relationships, and the kind of the interweaving story that they're kind of trying to tell, kind of giving you snippets of information. I didn't feel was particularly well handled. I don't think it's particularly well written, those sections. And again, there's too many characters to kind of try and juggle. You don't really have any type of connection for them. I think the movie should have really taken the point of view of the people in the bar, because it tends to focus as our primary focus this kind of second group of these kind of struggling addicts that have come into the group, and you feel like they're kind of somewhat of an antagonistic force, because they're obviously bursting in and keeping innocent people kind of somewhat hostage. You're already kind of sort of feeling, these maybe aren't the best people, but the movie then tries to kind of give us these backstories between them, and I don't really think it works, because we're positioned not to kind of really care about them. We get too little about them once they're at the bar to really kind of then care when we have flashbacks to them. And there's just too many to juggle here, and not even to mention the people outside. So when we get to that middle section, I feel it really drags. And then we have these interactive, kind of weaving kind of storylines that I don't think are particularly kind of well told narratively. I think people, that they're just a little bit kind of dull, a little bit uninteresting. You're not particularly kind of bought into these kind of characters. And yeah, so it becomes a little bit of a drag, that middle section, and it is the longest section. I have to say as well, this is not helped by some bad acting. There are a few performances here that I thought were okay. There's a few, but the majority are pretty weak. Now, I can forgive the movie in its kind of like low budget in regards to some of the effects and the gore. It kind of has that fun factor with that. But when it's especially when you're trying to do Tarantino-esque dramatic sequences, you have to be fairly spot on with your acting. You've got to be kind of fairly spot on with your writing, and this movie is lacking severely in those two departments. I mean, there is some when we have characters that try to have emotional sequences, that is when this movie is at its weakest, unfortunately, because it just can't do it. The writing isn't good enough in those sections, and the performances just aren't good enough. So the movie thinks it's being weighty, but it's just being quite cringy at places. So it's really a movie of two distinct kind of styles. I feel this movie could have been stronger and more fun had it lent more into the horror aspects, because that honestly is when it's at its most interesting. The dramatic weight to it, I feel, is misjudged and brings the movie down, and ultimately isn't all that interesting. And I think, as I say, kind of poorly acted and poorly kind of paced. Yeah, I mean, maybe you could have had some of that. Perhaps it needed to have an edit. It needed to have less cast members and maybe some stronger performances as well. So it's a kind of a mixed bag of a film, to be honest with you. There are elements here that you can enjoy, and if you want a schlocky gore fest, if you want creatures gripping up kind of like people in kind of bloodthirsty ways, you will get that. But you'll be saddled with some kind of poor dramatic elements as well. So it's kind of a real mixed bag. And I think their setup I think was okay. You know, too many carries I do think, but nonetheless their setup was okay. But it's once you get into that status quo, I feel the movie falls apart. But it does end strong, at least because we do have this fun kind of creature attack sequence, which is reasonably long and pretty gory towards the end. So it's a hard movie to really judge as an overall piece, because I feel its two distinct styles are very, very you know, different, both in positive and negative, and kind of like elements in story. So I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10, a kind of a bang on average mark really for a low budget kind of indie horror film. But yeah, it could have been a real fun creature feature. I think it could have maybe led more into the kind of the feast style kind of movie, and maybe not tried to kind of do a Tarantino-esque one, and it would have been a better movie. So it's a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it all? What would you think of it? If you have, please do let me know, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.